Clerk will record a vote. By a vote of 21 ayes, 39 nays, you have failed to pass Senate Bill 1203. Senate Bill 1384.
Senate Bill 1384, enacting Title 50, Chapter 1, Article of Revised Statute by selected related to school-sponsored student activities.
You've heard the third reading of Senate Bill 1384. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Do not vote until you hear the bell. House will now proceed to vote. Representative Stringer.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to preface my comments by saying that I am a strong supporter of free speech. I understand the importance of free speech. I understand the importance of free speech in the context of political discourse. I was once myself a student journalist. However, I am rising to oppose this bill because I believe there is a huge potential for unintended consequences. The sponsor of this bill spoke before the Education Committee, and I believe she sincerely believes that there are many conservative voices in our public schools that are being silenced, and I think that's her basic intent here. But I would simply, that's not my experience, that our public schools are full of conservative voices that are being silenced. So I'd ask you to ask yourselves, is that your experience? You think our public schools are full of conservative faculty and conservative students that are being repressed and silenced? So I submit that the more likely consequence is exactly the opposite of what the sponsor of this bill intends. And I'm not questioning her sincerity, the sincerity of her belief, but I think that the high likelihood is this will have serious unintended consequences. I would note that this bill gives protections to student journalists that no real journalist actually has in real life. Every journalist who writes for a living, every professional journalist has an editor and publishers who vet their work. So we're giving statutorily protected free speech to student journalists that nobody in real life really has. Also, the bill makes no distinction between college journalists and high school journalists. High school journalists can be as young as 13 or 14 years old. So I would ask you if it really makes sense to allow minors to have statutorily protected free speech and to limit the ability of school administrators to determine whether or not publications in a tax-supported student newspaper are appropriate. So today, I'm afraid the little red button is calling to me. It's calling to my conscience, it's calling to my conservative principles, and it's calling to my common sense, and I hope that it will call to you as well. So with that, I vote no.
Mr. Stringer votes no. Representative Martinez.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Sir, I think that, being back in high school and then in junior college and at the university, I think student journalism is a very important part of our community. I think that's where we develop, folks that want to go into that field. And I take notice that the high school journalism class team in Kansas that started doing an inquiry on their new principal that they received and learned that that principal did not have the credentials to be their principal, and soon afterwards resigned. So I think there's a lot of young folks out there who have a lot of talent, and I think that's where good journalism comes from. And then I vote yes.
Representative Martinez votes yes. Have you all voted? Representative Barton, Representative Blanc, Representative Clark, Representative Espinoza, Representative Solomon, Representative Weniger. How do you vote? Representative Farnsworth.
Speaker Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I know that we all think that we're doing a good thing here. This is not a good thing. I can tell you that. Free speech already exists. The First Amendment already exists. But in schools, we limit that free speech for a purpose. And what this does is takes the shackles off of those limits, because we think that a student ought to have the right to express their views unfettered with a few exceptions. So let me ask you folks, what about a student journalist that now advocates for abortion? How does this prevent that? What about suggesting as a student journalist that you're going to make comments about another student? Not libelous or slanderous, but harmful. This wouldn't prohibit that. So, members, I can tell you that this is well-intentioned, but this is well-intentioned gone amok. Because this is so much broader than the concept of free speech. This is so much broader than the First Amendment. This is essentially saying that the burden for any restriction, with the exception of those three, is on the school. So that means that the student has the right to essentially say whatever they want, yet we don't allow them to do that in other circumstances. They can't go out and post a sign out on the football field without some approval. What if they come out and make comments about their professors or teachers that, not libelous or slanderous, but certainly creates a problem within the school? Nobody now wants that teacher. That's not the proper way to do it. So we are not doing a good thing here. This is, and in fact, I think what's probably going to happen is you're going to see some schools are just going to shut down the paper and the media altogether, so that this is going to actually have a counter effect, that you're going to have schools that are going to shut it down because of the detriment that's going to come from us believing that children, because they are children, should have unfettered speech. We don't have unfettered speech for adults. We don't have unfettered speech for adult journalists. So, members, I would implore you to take this bill down, because this is not going to be good. Anyway, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I vote no.
Representative Farnsworth votes no. Have you all voted? Clerk, record the vote. By your vote of 41 ayes, 19 nays, you have passed Senate Bill 1384, signed in open session. The clerk's instructed to record the action of the House and convey the bill to the Senate. Senate Bill 1453.